Hello, my friends. Welcome to me, your host, Christian Watson. So, my friends, yet again, I am covering another police shooting of a black individual, or more so, I am covering the response to the police shooting of a black individual. And this topic, my friends, it gives me no joy. It gives me no joy. I mean, I hate seeing people lose their lives for whatever the cause, whatever the circumstances. Life is a beautiful gift. It's something that is both temporary, and the effects of your life can be permanent if you do the right thing. It's such a beautiful, complex gift. But there are so many people who undermine the value of life and try to make a life mean something that is consequential to a particular political moment. And that is what the topic of today's video is. Bakari Sellers, a CNN political commentator, someone who ran for office in South Carolina a few years back but lost, he recently had a press conference with Benjamin Crump, who I will address in a second. I will address Mr. Crump in a second because he's a part of this, what I'm talking about. He had a press conference with Benjamin Crump about the death of Andrew Brown. Now, for those of you who are unfamiliar, Andrew Brown was a man in Elizabeth City, North Carolina, who, what we know so far, was shot and killed by the police. Now, here's what we know about the case. We know that the deputies were executing a warrant to arrest him. We know that he was in the car at the time of the execution of the warrant, and we know that he was shot. We don't know what led up to the shooting. We don't know why he was shot. We just know that he was shot, and we know that he tried to drive away, and as he drove away, after he was shot, he smashed into a tree because of his headshot injuries. That's all we know. There have been 20 seconds of video shown privately to the family, but the public is still in the dark. The FBI has just launched a civil rights investigation, so things are still developing with this story. The details, we have a very skeletal frame of details about this story. We don't really have a lot. All we have is a skeletal frame of sparse details and abbreviated knowledge. So the reasonable person, the epistemologically knowledge-based reasonable person, would wait, hold their peace until we can get more evidence to deduce conclusions from. You know, logic, my friends, is nothing but a tool. Like a hammer needs a nail to be effective in terms of, making sure something stays stationary. The philosopher or the rational individual needs knowledge to fill that knowledge, to jam that knowledge into a process, a syllogism, so they can then interpret that knowledge. But for Bakari Sellers and Ben Crump, that doesn't matter. These people are already making definitive claims, false conflations about this case because of the color of the victim, and I am sick of it. I am sick of it because it absolutely eschews rationality. It absolutely eschews the need, the necessity to understand that knowledge is not a tool you use to advance your own propositions, but knowledge is a tool used to understand the world better. It destroys that understanding of knowledge and then tries to reinvent knowledge, not to understand the world, but to, as Vogel would say, in a Gnostic way, reinvent the world in a certain image. So what am I saying? Let me play what Bakari Sellers said after, a few days after the shooting came out, and I will give you my analysis.
I say often that only in this country can you have the trial of Derek Chauvin be interrupted by the death of Daunte Wright.
Look at Ben Crump. Benjamin Crump. I'll talk about him in a sec. He's just nodding his head. Yep.
Be interrupted by the death of Adam Toledo, be interrupted by the death of Ma'Khia Bryant, and now we find ourselves here in Elizabeth City. And so I'm tired.
He's tired. You know what I'm tired of? And he can be tired, that's fine. Because when you have Bakari Sellers' worldview, when you reduce everything in this world to race and race alone, it's very easy to become tired, because that is a lethargic, vampiric ideology that doesn't really give anyone a break, because guess what? To the racially obsessed mind, everything in the society, especially if you're a black individual, is posed against your very being. So I understand if he's tired, because his ideology is pretty tiring to me. Let's talk about this. Ma'Khia Bryant What we know right now is that Ma'Khia Bryant wielded a knife. She tried to stab someone. The officer made a call in that situation. It is unfortunate and sad that Ma'Khia Bryant lost her life. No one should have to lose their life. However, the circumstances dictate proportional action. And the officer had no clue in that case if that person was the person who was being called about, because apparently there was a phone call saying that someone is trying to stab me, someone's trying to hurt me. So when the officers get there and there's someone trying to actively stab someone, what are they supposed to do? That case has nothing to do with racism. But it's been conflated because Ma'Khia Bryant is black. Andrew Brown, we don't know the details. Daunte Wright, from what we know, was an accidental shooting. But because the officer was white and Daunte Wright was mixed race, it has to be race. Have you no shame, Bakari Sellers? Have you no shame, Ben Crump? Ben Crump has been going around the country actively taking every single case that has to do with a black person being shot and then spinning the case before the details come out or when the details are already out to fit his narrative. For example, Ben Crump went to the Daunte Wright shooting incident, and here's what he said about that entire case. It was intentional they stopped him. It was intentional they used the most force. They could have gave him a ticket. That's what they do in traffic citations. It reminds you of George Floyd. That was a misdemeanor. They could have given him a ticket for that, but when it's black people in America, they engage in the most use of force and it ends up with deadly consequences. Again, at the top of Crump's value hierarchy here is this sort of acknowledgement that black folks are constantly assailed by a system, and then he takes every bit of evidence that is black adjacent, if not inspired by racism, because he cannot prove that Potter, the person who shot Daunte Wright, was a racist. From what we understand, it was a tragic accident. He takes that and he reinterprets it to fit his worldview. Knowledge doesn't matter. Facts don't matter. Logic doesn't matter. Truth doesn't matter. What matters to Ben Crump is being able to align his pockets, being able to profit off of a intense fervor of ideological, identity-based rage that rests in the hearts of so many people who are being sold a lie that they as a black person, they as a Latino person, they as an Asian person are constantly under siege, and their social mobility is restricted because white folks or the system is restricting it. It absolutely undermines the creative element in man. The creative element in man, my friends, is the same element that separates the great men from the weak men. It's the same element that brought us so many innovations in society. It's the same element that allowed African Americans back in the 20s and the 30s that even before then, when they were actually facing severe societal and systemic oppression, it allowed many of them to still succeed under those pressures. The creative element is the element that has the ability to understand that your standing in the world is a spiritual standing, because guess what? The world is both perceivable and unperceivable. The future is not necessarily known, but if you apply the mindset of the present to the future, you have a chance, not a possibility, but you have a chance of bringing forth the kind of future that you want for your life. It is not your material conditions that you weigh your life by. It is not your circumstances. It is, in fact, the possibility, the potential of transcending those things. But the problem is, so many of these critical race theory-based, identity-based ideologies are predicated upon an understanding of material conditions. It's predicated upon wanting to bind African Americans or bind people to their material conditions. Stefanik and Delgado, two men who founded critical race theory, they said that racism exists in society, and this is in their book, only because the white working class and the white elites keep it alive. It can't be because certain individuals who are ignorant of all colors have certain biases. No. It has to be because there's a power structure going on. And when you view it like that, you can now look at any vestige of any given structure in that society and claim racism without actually having to prove it. It is an argument without any evidence. Then Ben Crump has the audacity. The audacity, again, he did this. He said that Ma'Khia Bryant was unarmed. And he had to delete that tweet. But before any of the details came out, well, actually, the details were actually already out. Before most of the case was fleshed out, we understood she had a gun, a knife. Before any of that, before he looked at any of that. He decided, you know what? She was unarmed. And of course, everyone called him out for it. Look, I can't assign intentions. I can't assign intentions to these people, man. I don't have that power. I can only use my faculty of reason to discern the facts and evidence that are in front of me. And the facts and evidence are these people are using emotional appeals to drum up certain propositions, and they are not caring about what actually corresponds to reality. They do not live in the real world. They do not live in the world of symbols, of syllogisms, of deduction, of induction. No. They live in a world where they can simply cry or they can simply use rhetoric to contort and twist things. This is sophistry at its highest peak right now. We are seeing sophistry happen in the streets. We're seeing sophistry happen in the halls of Congress when systemic racism is talked about. We are seeing sophistry happen. Now, is it possible to discuss these issues without sophistry? Of course. And there are plenty of perspectives. There are plenty of perspectives about policing in America that need to be addressed. And if Andrew Brown, if what we know so far is true, if he really had his hands on the wheel, and he wasn't trying to hurt anyone, and he wasn't posing a threat to the officers at that moment, this will be a bigger scandal than the beating of Rodney King, and rightfully so. If that is what happened, that's all we know so far. But we cannot definitively say that because there is just so much we don't know. Part of this is due to the sheriff's department not wanting to really release things because of regulations. Whatever. Regardless, if what we know happened to him is that's all it is, then yes, there needs to be outrage, there needs to be outcry. There needs to be severe reform, those officers need to be fired. But we don't know yet. I don't know, Bakari Sellers does not know, Benjamin Crump does not know, but they know one thing. They can profit off of this, either through clout, getting a reputation off of this stuff, building their image, or through money in Mr. Crump's case. In my opinion, when you profit off of the grief and the anger of someone, the only thing you have to offer to them is the continuation of their grief and anger. Because when that goes away, what else do you have? Let me just give you guys a small life tip. Never let anything be your only source of validation or action in this world. I like talking about politics and philosophy. That's not my only source of action in this world. I also like to love people. I like to care for people. I like to do all kinds of things. No matter what happens to any single value of mine, I still have plenty of more values to replace that value. The single-mindedness, the singleness, the unity of values, the singleness of values is one of the biggest cultural menaces that we're facing right now, and we're seeing it embodied in the sophistry of Benjamin Crump and Bakari Sellers. Reject their sophistry, look at issues critically, understand that policing in America does need to be reformed, that we do need to have critical looks at this kind of stuff, but they cannot take place by using a racially based context by which to view them, because if you do that, you will have a bunch of built-in assumptions that tell you nothing about the issue and everything about a distorted interpretation of what someone thinks the issue means. And if you have that distorted interpretation, you don't have reality. If you don't have reality, you don't have action. If you don't have action, you're impotent. Don't be conceptually impotent. Be powerful, be brave, be you. And most importantly, my friends, stay pensive. I love you. Bye-bye.